My world, the chaos around me, what I've known to be true. We think we know, but do we? Tick tock of the clock, and I see hands go in all directions. Can't see your face, but I see worry in my own reflections. Something tells me you've seen this face before. Redemption waits for you, I'm sure. I see your eyes in the moon.
Hi, I'm Brandy,
Hi, I'm Sean.
and this is Impossible Conversations. This is where we discuss controversial topics from different perspectives. And I'm super excited. This is our premiere show. So, Sean, this is it. This is the big
I'm
one.
looking forward to it too. I'm super excited as well. I can't wait.
This is great. So let me ask you, the audience, how would your life be different if you found out that the Earth was indeed flat and not a sphere? That's the question we're discussing today from a flat Earth versus sphere Earth perspective. And we're discussing this question because every time I've heard the discussion between flat Earth theory and sphere Earth theory, that question's always come up. And I'm always kind of surprised by it because basically, people want to know, well, so what? So what does it matter? What would it, and to me, I'm just like, I think it would matter a lot, but who knows? Maybe some people think, well, maybe day to day, nothing would change if we found that out. But I mean, Sean, how do you think it would change your life?
Oh wow. I mean, I obviously I think day to day, maybe it wouldn't change all that much because we experience what we experience down here, and that's just where we are. Um, we're not astronauts. We're not running up into space every day. We were promised we were supposed to be running up into space every day by now. Back in the 60s, they thought we would have moon bases by,
Yeah.
1979 or so,
Yeah. What happened
which
to that?
of course apparently never happened. So yeah, I mean, I think it would change our perception of our world more than our world itself. The world we live in is observably flat and motionless. We go through Earth every day, and we drive around,
Yeah, I
and
don't think about it. I don't think
nobody
about
thinks
it.
about it. It's not one of those things that anybody really we just accept it when we see the globe in the classroom when we're a
Right.
little kid, and
Mm.
we never really go back to it. And that's, I think, the most interesting point about this conversation to me is just our perception of the world. Why do we believe what we believe? And that's, to me, that's a great question. I don't see any problem in discussing that, although plenty of people do find a problem discussing this topic, which is very
Yeah,
interesting to
we're
me.
gonna get into that. I'm
Hey,
like,
it's incredible to me. So yeah, I think it's just fun to discuss, and we keep it civil, and there's no reason to get heated about it. Again, it's not
exactly.
to say someone's wrong or right. It's just to have a conversation about it.
Exactly. And I think that you and I both looked at what was happening in our world and decided that we really wanted to have a place for these kind of conversations. And it is very strange how you can't really talk about a topic that's controversial right now without people getting freaking out and getting emotional and walking away from family, friends, and people they've known all their lives because they have an opposing view on something. It's been very odd, and I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's that healthy.
I agree.
I think we ought to be able to have a conversation about anything and be okay with it and still accept that person for who they are. They're our brothers, our sisters, our family, and go about our lives. I mean, community is super important. I think you and I both share that view that having people come together is actually a really good thing. It's a very healthy thing. It's healthy for our bodies, our minds, and the more we separate from each other, the less connected we feel emotionally, and it's not the best place to be. So
I agree. I think that age old adage, that bar room notion of no politics, no religion, where you get kicked out of the bar. It's the same thing at like Thanksgiving dinner,
oh
or
yeah.
you don't want to talk about religion or politics. It's just a bad idea. But why? I really think we should be able to discuss these things in a rational way, and just debate ideas. You're not debating each other as human beings. You're
Right.
debating the ideas. That's really it. And I think that's what I think a lot of social media really kind of it starts into debating each other and debating egos rather than debating the actual idea behind what you're talking about.
Right, right. And then just vilifying people
Mhm.
and oh, well, who are you? You're not a scientist. You're not a this, you're not a that, as if we have to have some kind of credentials to have an opinion, to have a discussion
Mhm.
and to have validity. And I think that's another thing we really want to look at today is just like or on our show rather, in today is just we're all just learning as we go. We're all growing. We're all really having an experience, right? A human experience. And to continue with that experience, it's important to continue the conversations.
Yep.
So that's what we're going to do today. So, Sean, you have been interested or looking into flat earth theory for quite a while. So you're going to take that perspective, and I'm probably just as qualified as anybody. I'm going to take kind of the sphere earth perspective of what we really think that this is and what this is about, because I've like everybody else pretty much watching, I've in school, that's what I was taught, that's what I've seen a globe in every single classroom I've ever been in. And I actually have a personal experience I want to share as to why I have the belief that I do. And I think a lot of people might have something like that. So first, I want to find out from you, and I would love for you to share with our audience, what made you start looking into flat Earth theory?
Okay, so that's a great question. I mean, I've thought about this for a while now, and I can't actually remember why this happened to me. But I will say that I was, I'm kind of a conspiracy-minded person. I've always been, looking into the JFK, assassination, and was always interested in Star Trek and space things and things like that. And one of my oldest possessions that I have is an Encyclopedia Brown with all the planets and stars. And so I was always looking up and kind of wondering, I'm Irish, so I have that kind of like, like what is the meaning of all this? The philosopher type and musician, of course. So that kind of a lot of this really kind of ties into that whole mentality of like thinking about things in big, broad, strokes. And so I kind of just went through it, and I was looking at a bunch of things, and I was looking at some other things in the conspiracy world, and I finally I was seeing some flat earth things come across my screen, and I'm going, give me a break, come on. Because, just like you, obviously, I was brought up in the same exact way that you were. We all were, pretty much, unless you were brought up in homeschool by somebody who taught you flat earth, you're going to think pretty much the same as anybody else.
Yeah.
And I guess really what kind of got me interested was that exact thing. Like when if I said to you right now, or if I say to any of our audience members right now, the word earth, what's the first thing that comes into your mind?
Like
A picture of a ball.
Yeah, blue
It's
and green.
a sphere. Exactly, a sphere. So that's the first thing you think of. Now, what's interesting, why do you think that? If you look around you every day
I've
to
never
day,
seen it from space.
none of us have. I mean, that's the thing. You think of spinning ball immediately. Now, that's just interesting to me. I think in the very, very beginning of this whole, endeavor of just looking into it with an open mind, I kind of went to myself, well, yeah, that is interesting that, we really, that's just our go-to. That's it. We know it's just truth. We're taught you live on a spinning ball. That's it.
Mm.
And there's no questioning it, really. I mean, if you question it, you get called what? A flat earther.
Yeah.
That's like the worst thing you can get called. I mean, everyone's talking.
Or you get laughed at.
You get laughed at, and you got laughed at even at 5 years old. Those silly people back then thought the Earth was flat. Isn't that silly? And you don't even know why you're laughing. You're 5 years old. You can't even make a sentence, but you're laughing at people who believe in the flat Earth. So it really is pushed kind of from the very, very beginning of your schooling. So that's interesting to me, because if you want to start to get into psychology, who was it that said something along the lines of like, if you want to know who controls you, find out who you can't question. It was like, it was some very, I forget who exactly said that, but we're talking like Greek philosopher kind of thing. And it's true, because that when you're being gaslit about something, it's usually the people who are telling you, don't question me, just follow orders, just do what I say, and you can't question those people. And that's when you start to, and that's kind of really, I guess, what piqued my interest. I go, why can't I question this? What is going on here? So I just started looking into it, and very quickly, within a few days of looking into this that turned into now, 5+ years of being extremely interested in it. Um, it started to snowball very quickly into me going, well, that's interesting. Well, that's interesting. And just everything, just all the dominoes started falling. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought this was just known fact,
Mm.
and there's a lot of things that we think are known fact that aren't really known fact at all. And they're just theories. For instance, if you tell somebody, and this was one of the first things, of course, that we all check out when we first, visit the flat earth idea is, well, gravity, duh, come on, let's be real here. That gravity exists. We know that. I can drop something, I can take this on my desk and look, gravity, but that's the phenomenon of things falling to the earth. Gravity is really a theory,
Mm.
as explained by Newton and then obviously finished off by Einstein. It's a theory. And when people hear that, I've said that to people and people flip out and they're like, it's not a theory. What do you mean? Things don't fall to the ground. It's been proven. It's like, not really, and when people actually, like, when you really actually look into it, you realize that, well, gravity is a law. Well, yeah, it's a law under the theory of relativity.
That's right.
Let's be real here. You're talking about a law inside a theory. So,
Yeah.
that's one of the first things that you start to go to. And then you realize, wow, gravity can't really be reproduced in an experiment. There's really the only real proofs of gravity around, that we can really point to are things like Foucault pendulums and things like that. Foucault pendulums, these things kind of, when you really dig into what they are, they kind of come across as parlor tricks. If the world really was spinning and, and hurling through space, I would, and round on top of that, I think you would find a lot more readily available information just looking around you. And there really isn't very much out there. All the main things that people start to point to are like, well, ship's going over the horizon. You start to go into that. And if you can't see curvature from left to right on the horizon, what makes you think you can see it on the z-axis going straight ahead of you? There's no way. You're looking at it at a much further distance left and right than you are when you look out ahead of you. The physical horizon of the earth is supposed to be no more than 3 miles away, according to the globe earth theory. And that's an impossibility because we have pictures that actually show that it's not. So
it sounds like the things you started looking into started making sense to you. I mean, or no sense, depending on what the theory was. Is that what happened?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I kind of, again, I set out to debunk flat Earth. That's what I did. And like everybody, I mean, because I sat there thinking this is ridiculous. Why am I even looking into this? I've got to be an idiot, because we're all, ingrained with that idea that we must be a moron if we look at this in any objective way. So I started to set out to do it and I couldn't do it. And I still can't do it. I can tell you right now pretty safely that if I had to prove that the earth was round and spinning in a court of law, it would be extremely difficult to do so right now.
Do you think it would be difficult for anybody, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of course you're going to run into the people online. And of course, every day I post things about this all the time, just as kind of, I'm not trolling my friends. I'm kind of just getting them to think a little bit. But I find it interesting. So I really want to kind of point some things out to friends on social media and things like that. And they kind of laugh at me, of course, because that's what they're going to do. And I've gotten over that. In the beginning, I was kind of mad at people laughing at me for even looking at this. I wouldn't call myself a flat earther, but I would call myself a globe skeptic at this point. That's probably the best way to put myself, because I don't really want to believe in one or the other at this point, because believing is really the enemy of knowing. What do I know right now? I know that the earth, provably, when we look at it, isn't round. It's also not spinning from any. We literally have experiments, Aries failure. There's a bunch of different experiments that can't prove the earth is even moving, let alone spinning or hurling through space at 66,600 miles an hour. Interesting number. Lots of different things like that. So, I really don't, the things that I kind of ran into really just started to lead me to a place where I go, I really don't know what I don't know. And, you will run into those people who have been, I won't say indoctrinated, but they're educated into a system that completely teaches them from the very beginning that we live on a spinning ball hurling through space. And that's just the truth to them. So I found it very interesting to kind of challenge that truth, quote unquote truth, if you want to use quotes,
Right.
And that's the thing. I never ever in my adult life, or even in my my formative years, ever questioned, okay, we don't really live on a spinning ball. I don't think anybody ever did. And I really feel like, it woke me out of a way of thinking about my world. My worldview became detached from my ego, I guess is a good way to put it. And I think I'm in a healthier place than I was, say, 5 years ago. I think, because my worldview is no longer attached to my ego, and I don't get angry if someone challenges my bubble, the way that I can perceive the earth, I guess is a good way to say it.
That's a really good point, and I'm curious about that. I'm really curious about how people react whenever you mention flat earth theory. Like what kind of response do you get from people? Because I love what you said, that the worldview is detached. My worldview is now detached from my ego. I mean, being a yoga and meditation teacher, we teach people basically, I teach people basically, you have to detach from your ego. Like anything, if you attach your ego to anything in life, then there's going to be pain, there's going to be suffering. There might be that anyway, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's intensified. It all becomes about you and not really about anything else. So I'm curious. So how do people respond whenever you start talking about flat earth theory?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing, and this comes from experience of it myself, and that's what's funny about when you bring it up after doing it for as long as I've done it, or looking into it as long as I've done it, I guess it's a better way to say it. You realize that there is a huge amount of cognitive dissonance that kicks in the beginning, where you literally do not know how to respond to this. So much so to the point that it really, you'll be lucky if you get through it without breaking your mind a little bit. You kind of have to break apart everything you think you know. So generally, I think people respond badly to it because they have a notion that flat Earth is something that it actually isn't. I mean, when we talk about flat Earth, people a lot of times can't rectify the Newtonian or Einsteinian physics and then overlay that on top of flat Earth, because you can't do that. There's no way of overlaying flat Earth above or below Newtonian and Einsteinian physics. Those things are incompatible. They do not work, and they cannot work. So that's the thing. They cannot think about the Earth from a place that doesn't have Newtonian or Einsteinian physics attached to it. You have to detach those things and say, okay, those are constructs that we had to formulate to explain that the Earth was a sphere. For instance, gravity, like gravity itself, gravity only really exists to explain that the Earth is able to go around other heavenly bodies like the sun. And the sun goes around the great attractor, and the galaxy goes around the great attractor, and all these different things. So that's the problem, is that the cognitive dissonance starts from the very beginning, and you watch it happen. And the only way to really truly look at this with an open mind is to throw out literally everything you think you know about the universe and start over. And that's kind of where it comes down to, because you kind of have to look at this from a standpoint, what do I know? Okay, I know things go down. I know things go down towards the Earth, but why? Well, gravity. Okay, well, gravity isn't really the reason. It's just an explanation for that phenomenon. The phenomenon happens with or without the explanation.
Right.
So you have the answer already. We know that things go down, right? But we don't know why. Now, do we need gravity to make things go down? Not necessarily. It's once you start looking up to the sky and go, what about that sphere up there? Does our place look like that? And how do we explain what's so once you start looking up, then all hell breaks loose, because then you have to start explaining how rectifying what you see in the sky to what you see down here. Let's be realistic now. What you see down here as a human being every single day of your life, and every single day of anybody you know in your life, all your ancestors saw a flat, motionless Earth. That's our observation. The observation is flat and motionless. The claim is spherical and spinning. So that really is what's going on. If of course you have to discount things like NASA and other things like that. Again, starting over from scratch without any space agencies or television or anything involved, what would you think the Earth was if you weren't told it was a sphere? You would look around you and go, looks pretty flat, and it looks pretty motionless,
Mm,
and then the next thing you start to think about is the nature of the things around you, right? So
mm,
I think one of the biggest proofs that people point to for flat earth, and I think there's good reason for it, is the nature of water. Large bodies of water at rest are flat. They're just observably flat.
Now
And that's
I did hear someone say that it's level,
Mhm.
but not necessarily flat. So I
Okay.
found that interesting. I found that very interesting.
Interesting. Level, but not flat, meaning I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Like the water, I think the water is level and it stays at a certain level, but not necessarily flat because it goes with the curvature of the earth if you
Of
believe it.
course, it would have
Right.
to. Yeah, there's really no other way to go around it. So you'd have
Yeah.
to find a way to curve the earth, the water to a ball, to a sphere,
Right.
which is one very, very difficult thing because if you look at any body of large water, they're all observably flat.
Yeah.
So
But how does
when
it stay? You're just
yeah,
going like, how does
you
all
know,
the water
there,
stay?
there are explanations that have now. I mean, since 2015, the flat Earth has come a long way, like with their explanations and their
Mhm.
scientific, looking into scientific reasons that these things could exist without the spherical Earth theory. So, for
Mm.
instance, I was watching a podcast to kind of bone up for this interview. I was watching a podcast of Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole, which is a channel that I frequent, and Jeranism, doing a podcast, with somebody and talking about, well, what exactly holds us to the ground and things like that. And back in the day that this podcast was made, that currently we have more explanations for it, but back then there was no real good explanation outside of buoyancy and density and
Mm.
liquid, and fluid dynamics and things like that, which make perfect sense. You don't really need gravity to hold things in a density gradient. If we're in a pressure density gradient, which is really what we are in, either way, in flat or round, it doesn't really matter. You don't really need something to hold things because things, air is a fluid. So things that are heavier are just going to fall towards the ground. But
Mm.
that's the thing. We were always wondering, in antiquity, we were wondering, why do things fall to the ground? Newton, famously, supposedly saw an apple fall from a tree, which I don't think is even true. But but the bottom line is, why do things go to tend towards the earth? Now, in modern day, we have a couple of physics things that make sense for that. And believe it or not, before even gravity was postulated the way it was, physics can explain that with what they call electrostatic acceleration, which is
Mm.
essentially it's called incoherent electrostatic acceleration, which essentially is the tendency of the Earth to be in negative charge. And as you go up per meter, the Earth goes up 100 volts in potential energy per meter as you rise or ascend from the earth. So
Hmm.
that can go into the millions of volts as you get higher and higher and higher up
That's
into the
interesting.
atmosphere. So that alone can pull things towards the earth. And honestly, an MIT physics professor, I forget his name, I should look him up, but there's an MIT physics professor who talks about it, who's taught at MIT for decades, talks about incoherent electrostatic acceleration as the actual real stuff that holds us together down here. And
Mm.
he kind of discounts gravity. Gravity is famously a weak force. They always say that. They do say gravity is a weak force. Electrostatics can actually defy gravity very easily.
Hmm.
So that's the thing. Electrostatic force is much more powerful down here than gravity ever thought of being. And what he actually says in this video that I've watched with him talking to a classroom, he does say that basically electrostatics govern everything down here, and gravity governs the larger bodies.
Mm.
To keep planets orbiting each other, that's when you
Mhm.
start getting into gravity. That's no longer about electrostatics anymore. But down
Interesting.
here, everything is held together by electrostatics. It's all electrical down here.
Hmm.
So that's the thing. Gravity really does exist only to hold together the spherical Earth theory. As soon as
Mm.
you get down to ground level, you're talking about electrostatics and practically
Something.
nothing else.
That's
So,
that's very
and most
interesting.
people don't even understand that. I didn't understand that until I saw this video and went, oh, okay. Well, if a physics teacher is saying this, a doctor, he's literally a doctor of physics, you got to think that there's something to that. And obviously there is, because gravity really it's not needed. There's no real reason for it.
Right.
Buoyancy and density explain everything perfectly, and they're all repeatable. You can demonstrate them in experiments and repeat them over and over and over again. It all makes perfect sense. You don't need any magical force, if you want to call it magical. If you want to get cheeky about it, no magical force of gravity needed. And it's true. It really isn't needed for most of the things that we experience in everyday life. So that comes back to our very first question: how is it going to affect your everyday life? It doesn't affect it very much. It really doesn't. It affects how you perceive your life, I think.
Yeah. Okay. There's
Mhm.
a good point. There's an interesting point that it would affect how you perceive your life, not necessarily how you conduct your life, right?
I would think so. I mean, obviously, the very first question that everybody starts to ponder as soon as you get past the idea, like, let's say you just for the heck of it, you have entertained the idea and wrapped your brain around and say, okay, maybe this is possible. What's the very first question that's going to come up? Well, okay, well, if this place is flat and not moving, and for the heck of it, the stars and planets and things that we see above us are just lights in the sky, then what is this place? Who built it?
Mhm.
Who made this place? Who made the dome that would surround us? As described in Genesis. I mean, we have a dome over our heads. That's just what we have. We have a dome called the firmament over our heads that essentially holds the water from the water. So there's a lot of different things that start to get into, like, you start getting into religious aspects and belief systems after that. And that's really the first question. It's like, well, who built this place and why are we here? So you
We're
start to get
definitely
much deeper immediately. And that's
yeah.
the very first question. You kind of go
We're
immediately to
definitely
that.
going to come to that probably
Hmm.
in another episode, because
Yes,
I think
exactly.
that's very significant. Because from what I understand, a lot of religious texts
Hmm.
refer to a plane or a flat Earth.
Hmm.
Which, a plane, when we think of a plane of existence, is usually flat. A
Hmm.
plane is flat.
Well, think
So
about the planet,
say again,
planets, planet,
planets. That's
planet,
right.
planet,
Isn't that
plane.
interesting?
Just add a T to plane and you have a planet. you know.
That's very interesting.
So words are interesting like that, but
Yes, I do want to get back for a second to
Mhm.
what we were talking about in terms of how people react whenever we start talking about these things. 2 points came up for me. First of all, I have a friend who works for NASA, and when I mentioned this to her, I said, "Hey, we're going to be doing a show. Maybe you can come on, and it's going to be about flat Earth theory." The first thing she did was laugh, right? So that was I definitely got a chuckle from her,
Mhm.
and what she said was, "We have literally thousands and thousands of files of photographs of a sphere Earth." And I said, "Are you sure? Are you positive? Do you know that that's true?" And she and for her, there's no doubt. For her, there's no doubt of where they came from. And you know, I what I know about this discussion is there are a lot of people in the flat Earth theory camp who don't trust NASA.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is?
Um, yeah, that's a tough one. Many people don't, because there are so many anomalies in the history of NASA that are just glaringly unbelievable, like to the point of lunacy. Where, for instance, when you look at, when you ask NASA, um, and this has been done, someone called up NASA, the video department, and said, I'd like a video of the Earth spinning in space. And they were told flat out, we don't really have anything like that. There's also other
Why
things. Yeah, there's
not?
also other things like there was no picture taken of the Earth from 1972 and all the way up until 2015. There's
Interesting.
no full actual photograph of the Earth. Every single photograph that you think you know of the Earth almost certainly is a composite image. It's not a
Composite. I
photograph.
did hear. I did
They're
hear
all
that.
composite images, and there was no real photograph, real actual admitted photograph, not image, but actual photograph taken from 1972 until 2015. Now, think about the amount of things spinning out in space. We have supposedly thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of satellites orbiting Earth at any given moment. And we don't have one full picture of Earth in That amount of years, that's a
That
lot
is
of years.
that is interesting.
So
Well, so what about all these pictures we see online, of the
many
globe
of them,
Earth?
well, when they finally put out the blue marble in 2015, people went in and they were like, okay, well, here's a full picture of Earth in 2015. And people went in and they found that the picture contained, photographic evidence of Photoshop being used.
Really?
That there were cut and paste clouds, there were cut and paste, multiple cloud formations that looked completely identical. They even found the word sex written in the clouds, upside down. There's a lot of very weird things going on. And finally, NASA actually had to come out and say, well, you're right. It's not really actually a photograph. It's a composite image. So they literally, NASA got called out and had to backpedal. So, if you look it up, you could look up the guy who actually made the photo made the image. I shouldn't say photo because it's not a photo. He made the image, famously said it's Photoshop, but it has to be. That's exactly what he said in the interview. It has to be.
He didn't say why.
He did say why. He said basically that he was given strips of information. He wasn't actually given a photograph to work with. He was given strips of information that he inserted what he thought people would expect to see if they were looking at a full globe.
Interesting.
Now, that was one of the first images after 1972 of the full Earth that NASA released, and all of a sudden people found out it was fake. So there's a lot. That's why people don't trust NASA. There's too many things. I mean, let's go back to the moon landings. I mean, that's where this all started, really. When you look at the moon landing tapes and you look at everything, it looks horrible on television. That's because it was being filmed by a television camera from a projection television. Then it was sent to all the substations around the United States and then broadcast from there. So you're looking at like a fourth generation actual film of from a television camera.
That's another topic we'll be talking about at some point.
To me, is sort of because supposedly everything malfunctioned that day. Well, we couldn't get the feed to work, so we had to do it this way. Then when you go, okay, well, great. You must have, obviously this was on a projection camera, so you must have the film of this somewhere. Oh yeah, we did, but we taped over it. The original moon landing reels have been taped over.
Wow.
So can we look at the telemetry reels? The telemetry of all the astronauts as they're going up and their trajectories and the flight there. No, we don't know where those are. We can't find them.
Wow.
And even if we could find them, we don't have the machines to play them back on anyway.
That's very interesting.
Now we have, from the 1950s and 1960s, original reels from rock and roll era, or classical era, recordings, but we don't have the most momentous occasion in human history of man landing on the moon. To me, that just, so there's very good reason why people don't trust NASA. I mean, and going even further into the moon landings, if you look at, they did a world tour, the three famous guys from the moon landings, and they gave moon rocks to a lot of different nations around the Earth. They gave one to Holland, and Holland finally, decided, okay, we're gonna test the moon rock just to see exactly what it's made of. They found out that the moon rock they had in their museum for decades at that point. I think it had just been put in the museum by somebody, who had the dignitary had it in their possession, and then they put it into a museum, and the museum tested it and said, this is petrified wood.
Really?
Yeah. So they were like,
wow.
This, and they had it in the museum. They took it out of the museum because they were like, this is not a moon rock. This is petrified wood.
That's interesting.
So, that's another interesting. Now, there's plenty of reasons why that could be. Maybe someone stole it and, made off with it and put a petrified piece of moon rock in its place. But, again, how are you going to prove that? So you'd have to get back to the people who actually received the rock and the chain of custody, which is very difficult to prove. But we do have proof that they do not have the telemetry tapes. They do not have the original reels from the moon landing. There's all the blueprints of all the vehicles that got them to the moon are all destroyed and gone.
Well, we'll definitely talk some more and get deeper into moon landing at some point.
That's the NASA stuff and exactly why people don't actually really trust what's going on.
Got it. That's some of the reasons why people don't trust NASA.
Exactly.
I understand that. Now, isn't NASA a government organization?
Yes, they try to hide it where they make it into. I mean, one of the things when you start to get into the actual physics, I guess it's a bad word, physics, the rationale for how would they lie about something so huge.
Yeah.
When you think about NASA was started by a Nazi, brought over here in Operation Paperclip. So Werner von Braun, excuse me, Werner von Braun came over in the Nazi trade when they brought over all the great Nazi scientists and rocket scientists and things like that to basically help the United States after they lost. And they came over in Operation Paperclip, and Werner von Braun became the head of NASA. And essentially, Werner von Braun, when you look at the Nazi kind of, the mantra of like, if you're going to lie to the masses, make the lie huge, so huge that no one would believe anyone could lie about it. One of the things about the moon landings that was very interesting, at least to me in the beginning when I found out, was that like when you hear about the NASA moon landings, you hear that like, oh, my grandfather worked on that, my great grandfather worked on that, my dad did this, my mother did this. That everyone in the United States somewhere has a story about someone they know who worked on the moon landings. There's a very good reason for that, because they outsourced the entire moon landing. Like all of the projects in the moon landing were outsourced to, I think, something like over 100,000 agencies or companies in the United States. Now, if you're working for NASA and you have to keep everything really, really tight and secure for something as important as the moon landing, why would you outsource to that many people all of these little nitty-gritty details and then have to assemble them later? It just seems a little odd to me that would happen. But when you want to start looking at why lie and how would they formulate the lie, what's a great way to do it? Outsource to everyone so that they can go back and tell their families, I worked on the moon landings. I did this for NASA for the moon landings. So literally everyone in the United States knows somebody who worked on the moon landings. So if you're challenged on it and you go, well, so you really believe we went to the moon? Well, yeah, I know we went to the moon. My grandfather worked on the moon landings. What, are you calling him a liar?
Yeah, that
So
seems really elaborate. I'm just saying.
It's not very elaborate. It's very simple, actually. It's more elaborate to think that NASA would outsource to hundreds of thousands of companies all of this important technology that needed to get them safely to a place that we've never been to before. And they did it on the first try perfectly.
Yeah, that's suspicious to me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very suspicious to me. So I want to share my personal experience about something. So, God, how many years ago is this now? Oh, many years ago, I went to a conference with 3 people. It was Bruce Lipton, who's a molecular biologist. A lot of people know Biology of Belief, Bruce Lipton. Adam McLeod, the dream healer. And that's who I really actually went to see, because I saw a video of Adam actually manipulating energy in what he called a mass hologram and the holographic quantum healing thing. And he was doing some very strange looking things. But when I saw him do it, I was like, I know exactly what he's doing. Like I started just crying basically, because I was like, I know exactly what's going on there. I got to go see this guy in action. I got to see if this is real, right? So I went to this conference. That in itself is a whole nother story. But the other person at this conference was the 7th person in space. I forgot his name.
Edgar Mitchell.
Edgar Mitchell. Perfect.
Yep.
That's it. Thank you. And so I didn't know anything about Edgar Mitchell. But when he got up there and he talked about his story, what he said was, I went up into space and I was in this capsule in space. And as it was spinning around, I was looking out my little window and I would see the earth, the sun, the moon, the earth, the sun, the moon, kind of like in this circular kind of thing he was doing. And he had a mystical experience. Now, given that information, as he spoke about it, he seemed very sincere. He seemed very much, in what he was talking about. I don't think I'm thinking, I think he would have mentioned at some point that the earth did not look like what people said it looked like if he was in that situation. That's just my thought process about it. And for him to have this mystical experience, I think it was a profound thing for him and something big enough that he wanted to share. He even started an entire kind of organization called Ions. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's kind of an organization dedicated to spiritual phenomenon and spiritual experience, because it was something akin to something, his experience was akin to something he had read in the Mahabharata, which was, having this mystical experience, being in a space of complete awareness and consciousness, which I was just like, wow, that's pretty profound. So for me, for hearing that experience, I think that I kind of had a sense of, wow, like that is something major. That is something very, very profound. And I think that for me kind of solidified my idea of what the earth might look like. But to me, I don't think it's as important what it looks like. Not that it wouldn't change my opinion of how it would change my daily life, but because I tend to believe that everything is kind of an illusion, right? Even the place, the reality, that all of it is kind of a projection. And what's more important is who's in control of that projection, right?
Yeah.
So back to the point around who's creating the story around what you believe, I think is extremely significant. Because if we're not the ones in control of our experience, who is and why?
Very good point. And that it really starts to come into metaphysics at that point. You really start to again, the first question most people have is who created this place, if that's the truth. And that can go for anything. That can go for the entire universe. No matter how small or big you think this universe might be, you're still probably going to get to that conclusion at some point. If it's not us controlling this, then who is it? Are we looking at the mind of God when we look through a telescope? The further it always seems to me like the further I've gotten into this subject and other subjects related to this kind of metaphysical kind of experience that we're having, it always seems to me that like the further we look, the more we see, and that's just how it is. No different than any conspiracy that you might look into. The further you look into every conspiracy, the further you're going to get down the rabbit hole, and the further you may actually even get away from the truth. So like defining what is truth is very difficult as well, but trying to get to the bottom of something is very, very difficult to do sometimes. And maybe you will never get to the bottom of it. Let's look at the earth itself. I mean, the earth itself, they've only drilled down as far as 8 miles. That's as far as they've ever drilled into the earth. Wow. So, everything they even talk about with the core of the earth and all things like that, that's all conjecture. They're just guessing. They really don't know what the earth, Earth's core is made of. They say that it's magnetic and the Earth's core, generates this magnetic field. But if you melt certain metals down past their melting point, they lose their magnetic properties. So, what exactly is the Earth and where does the magnetic field come from? There's all these questions. My big thing with it is that, yes, I agree. I think no matter what you think of this world, whether it's spherical or, flat or concave, which is another one that I haven't really gotten much into, but I know that that's another one. I really think, it will come back to that at some point. I mean, I think we all have an innate, sense in the back of our heads, like we create other things. So what created us and what created this place and what, so you kind of, I think that's inescapable, really, so I think it's also just human nature to want to go to that question pretty much immediately, because we're all looking for meaning in this life. That's really what it comes down to,
I think that's true too, Sean. Back to the idea of what's the reaction of people when you start to shake up their foundation of what they believe.
Very good.
I think this is important too, because there's a kind of fear around not knowing, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And when you said what you just said about, well, we may never know, I think that really stirs up some fear and insecurity and terror in some people, because some people just absolutely have to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely,
they have to know.
That's completely true.
To feel safe in their body and in their spirit. I think it's important for them to kind of get a grasp on things, right? When the truth is, it's elusive. I mean, that's the truth of it. There's no true security in the world. We want to believe that there is, but any one of us can go tomorrow and not have any answers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's true. You're right. And it's really funny that you use the exact words of shaking someone's foundation. That's exactly what, when I was watching the podcast to kind of bone up for today, that's exactly what Dave Weiss, who is one of the guys who I also follow right now. He's actually DITRH, which is Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole. So Dave Weiss is the guy who runs that on YouTube, but he talked about exactly that. That's the big thing about flat Earth, is that as soon as you start to rattle someone's foundation, they don't like that, so they respond sometimes violently. I mean, some people literally, I mean, I had to block someone not too long ago that got like literally threatened a friend of mine online because of it. He threatened to like a schoolyard kind of fight, and I'm like, okay, you can't stay on my friends list. If you're going to like be challenging people to fist fights on my friends list, you're probably not going to stay. So it's alarming to me that people are that, heavily indoctrinated or heavily attached. Like I said, let's go back to what we were talking about before, their ego is so heavily attached to their worldview that if you shake that foundation at all, they see you as an actual threat to them, which is very scary to me. So for me, I've grown up so much in the last 5 years because of this, because it's really opened my mind to so many other possibilities. And it also has allowed me to just admit what I don't know, and I think a lot of people aren't willing to do that either, where they go, well, I just don't know that. It's like, no, they think they know, and they think they have a very good handle, like they say in the Men in Black, people think that they really got a pretty good beat on things down here, we really don't. Let's get realistic here. We don't really have a good beat on things. We really, even the greatest physicists will tell you that like 95% of what we think we know is wrong, or we just don't know 95% of what the universe is made of. What's the search for dark matter? Where did that come from? Because they don't know. They can't explain any of this stuff, So, I mean, even physicists can admit that. And I think that's a healthy thing to do.
It is. That's okay.
Yeah.
And I think one of these, the problem that starts to arise is whenever we were younger, and here's another indoctrination issue. When we are younger and we're taught that we don't know something, that it's bad, right? Remember the grading scale, A, B, C, D, F?
Yep.
If you don't know, you fail. And that's a bad thing. So this was an indoctrination started when we were very young. What do you mean you don't know? It's bad to not know, or I already told you this. You should know this, right? And that also really dampens like the self-esteem. And you don't feel like you can go confidently into something if you don't know something. Now, what's happening today, right now, is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of different information coming from different places, and people saying, oh, that's not right, that's misinformation, oh, you should know, you don't know this, you should know that. And I really feel like that kind of culture is setting us up to completely kind of like downgrade our power, our sense of power.
Yes.
And maybe it's intentional, maybe it's unintentional. I'm not going to call it out right now. Maybe on another show I will, but right now it doesn't matter. What matters is we do have the power to have confidence in what we do know and what we do believe. And just because somebody wants to give us crap for what we don't know, or what they think we should know, that shouldn't affect us.
I agree. Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up the whole fact of, and that's again, going back to what I've learned from just looking into flat Earth more than anything, is I know that I don't know a lot of things. That's completely fine by me, and I have no problem with that. And if I'm presented with alternate information, I can change my mind at the drop of a hat. My mind isn't made up. So that's another freeing thing about this, is that my mind is no longer made up. I'm not, positive that this place is a sphere or flat or whatever it might be. But, I remember my brother back in the day when I was a little kid, I used to walk around saying to everybody, oh, I know. And my brother actually called me out on it once. He's just like, Sean, look, you don't know everything. Don't stop saying, because you don't know. Okay. Just get, and it's so funny that you brought that up. That just popped into my brain. I remember that conversation my brother had with me. I was like 12 or 13. I'm walking around going, I know, and I don't know anything, like we really don't, you look at,
it's a security mechanism.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Now, the one thing I will say about when you said, it kind of gives you your power back. The one thing that I have actually garnered from flat Earth that I really do appreciate, it has brought me back to a creator, of my own understanding. And, that's my own journey to make. That's your own journey to make. That's everybody's own journey to make. But it really does kind of lead you back into that direction. And once you start to, again, whether or not it's an actual fact or not, whether or not the Earth is flat or round, if you kind of wrap your brain around to the idea of why would they lie about something like this, you start to understand that maybe they're lying. And sometimes we don't understand why people lie. Sometimes people lie just to have power over you. And a lot of times that's what it is. I don't think we understand that, because I think we're probably generally good people that wouldn't lie to gain power over people
Right.
just for the sake of gaining power, right? That we'd probably lie for some other alternative reason, or alternate reason. But, when you start to wrap your brain around the fact that maybe people are lying just to gain power over you and to keep you in a docile state of mind where you're thinking, well, I'm space dust. So if you think of all the things that we think we know about the universe, and spherical Earth theory, and how we're spinning through a vast void of nothing, literally a vacuum with nothing in it. We are space dust made out of the stars. I mean, we've had scientists actually say, forget Jesus, stars died so that you could be here today. That's an actual quote from a scientist, a very famous scientist.
Wow.
So that, and the whole audience applauded. And I was like,
powerful.
that's pretty powerful. I mean, you're talking about almost like spells at that point. Like when you're talking about like casting spells on people, you're nothing, you're meaningless, you are space dust, you're hurling around in a vast nothing. You can't get off this planet because you're never going anywhere. God isn't necessary because science has replaced him. Then you start to get into the reasons why people would lie to keep you down, to keep your ego and your sense of self-worth and power in check. Then you start to get into the nefarious side of it, which can get dark very quickly. I mean, if you allow yourself to. But it is interesting. I mean, if you think of it in that light, it starts to become very interesting where you go, I can see the reason for people, if they need to keep the masses in check. That's a very good way to do it, to keep you thinking that you're meaningless, you're nothing. And I don't subscribe to that. I think Flat Earth has really brought me back to my own sense of self-worth and power, where I'm like, no, I am meaningful. And we may very well be the most meaningful thing in all of existence that we and I don't think that's ego saying that. I think that's literally just looking at how things are constructed in this world and how things have laid themselves out to be. And I think that's a healthy thing. I mean, I think I'm much more meaningful, and I have a much more solid grasp on my sense of self-worth, I guess, since I started looking into this 5 years ago. And I can definitely say that wasn't the case before that. So,
well, that's, I think in that sense, in that vein, anything that really empowers us and lifts us up, brings us to a place where we feel more confident, more secure within ourselves for whatever reason, I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
And then the reverse is probably true, is maybe it's not as good. I want to say good, not as good, because I think there's always potential, the further down you go, to go that much farther up. I'm just the eternal optimist, I think.
No, the same way. It's really funny. I have that dichotomy inside of me as well, where I'm an optimist, but I'm also a pessimist. Like I can see the reasons for like some of the darkness in the world, but I also want to hope that the world is going to be great.
Exactly. And I think that's how you and I are alike in a lot of ways, Sean. Like I think we're both. You're Gen X, right? You were kind of born in that generation. Me too. And what's great about Gen X, I was thinking about this earlier today. What's great about the Gen X generation is, we kind of saw like some of the worst of the worst. So we thought, right? Some of the worst things we brought up in some kind of crappy environments sometimes. And we brought in the grunge era. It was like this angst, this really angry angst. I know, like the mosh pit, and like,
I got the flannel.
You do. You're on track with it today. And I was like, yeah, like we got to do something. But then what happens to Gen Xers also, it's almost like as if we were also in the era of like motivational speakers and inspirationalists and people who had questions and who had answers. And it was almost as if we're the generation of like, okay, we're going to show you how to change your crappy situation into something really, really good. And a lot better than what it was, So I think this show is going to be absolutely incredible. This was a good discussion. Do you feel complete?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. I mean, again, this is a really general way to discuss it because, I mean, this topic, oh my God, there's so much involved. I mean,
it's vast.
It's incredible. I mean, that's the thing. Once you start getting lost in this rabbit hole, you just keep going deeper and deeper, and it just gets more confusing as you get further down in, again, a lot of times it is easier just to kind of look at what is the truth here. Yes, it's probably not going to affect us all that much. It would affect kind of some of the very big things around the world, like all the institutions and things like that, scientific institutions.
Mm,
If this were the truth, it would be huge, obviously. But yes, day to day, what is it going to really do? Not a heck of a lot,
mm,
but it does change your mindset on certain things, like where you start to kind of just wrap your brain around certain ideas. And
yeah.
that's kind of where I approach it from. I really approach it from kind of a thought process rather than like an actual, like, am I really going to find the truth of what this world is right now? Probably not,
Right.
let's be realistic.
I like that perspective.
Yeah.
I like how you said, it may not change our day to day, but it might, kind of change our worldview and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
it just gets you thinking in a different and on a
Right.
different plane, let's say, pun intended,
And
I
pun
mean,
intended. Exactly. Exactly. I think for me, like I think it would change my day to day only because I love change.
mhm.
And if something massive really came into my view and went, hey, this is not what you thought it was,
Yeah.
I think it would change a lot about
Definitely
how
would.
I conduct my
I
life.
think really the earth would kind of be shattered in a lot of ways. I mean,
Yes.
you're talking about evolution and all these other different things that would just have to be thrown out the window. There's really no other
Right.
way to do it. I mean, so yeah, you're talking about an earth shattering kind of thing. I mean,
And then
again,
people go, now what?
they would, it's a mind, it's a mind thing more than anything. It wouldn't really change anything about what we go through every single day. Like I said, it really wouldn't, but it would shatter people's brains, and as it does day to day when people just talk about it. If I just bring up those, you can't even get the second word out of your mouth. If you go, well, I researched flat. You what? Oh my God, you researched flat. You can't even get the word earth out of your mouth before people flip out. So, yeah, imagine that on the grandest of scales. I can only imagine the chaos that would ensue after that, so
Honestly, I think it's glorious only
yeah,
because I love change and I thrive
yeah.
on change and for the better.
Mhm.
I think things are on a precipice of changing for the better. I
Yeah, I
really
think
do.
our mindsets are really kind of on a ledge right now. I think, and
Mhm.
that's good. I think people should be searching for truth, and I think that's really what this is all about. And sometimes the truth is you just don't know, and that's completely fine.
And that's okay. Yeah, it's safe to not know. Like that's a
Yep.
belief, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you now, working with beliefs for as many years as I have, the one of the beliefs is it's not safe to not know. And if we can all change that, like right
Hmm.
here, right now, let's do it. It's safe to not know.
I'm completely fine with that.
Yay. Awesome, awesome. Well, Sean, I appreciate the conversation. This was really, really excellent. Thank you so
Likewise, I
much.
had a good time.
Yeah, thanks for engaging with me today. And I think we want to have more of these conversations about flat earth versus sphere earth because it really does shake the foundation, pun intended. It shakes the foundation of how we question things, and
Yep,
we should be questioning things.
I agree.
Awesome. All right, guys. Hey, join us next time for the next episode, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Have a good day.